Okay, if everyone is ready, Principal, are you ready? Ambassador, Professor Oshieng, Professor Yu, if the four main participants at this point are ready, we can start. I do not hear noise, so good morning to all. Zhao Shang Ho, Wan Shang Ho, good morning from us here at the KFL campus, and good evening to those in China. Welcome and thanks to all for coming out, especially the participants in China, who, as we say here in Barbados, are being deprived of their night rest on this Friday evening in China. My name is David Bulbulia. I am the co-director at the Confucius Institute. And this morning, this evening in China, we are here to celebrate both the Confucius Institute Day and the China National Day, both of which have actually passed, but we are still within the realm of what is appropriate and suitable to celebrate these two events. And what better way to celebrate than for the CI to present to you, our audience, another example of the cooperation which is both taking place and that is possible as we at the KFL campus expand the range and depth of cooperation with our partner in China, the China University of Political Science and Law. I believe you would have on your screen, or we can make it available to you fairly quickly, the program that we have for today's activities, so you can see how we are going to proceed. At this point, though, I wish to take the opportunity to recognize some important and significant participants in this activity. And this seems to be the time in Barbados for apologies. So if I leave out anyone, it is not through a deliberate act, but by some measure of oversight. So I have, first of all, to recognize Professor Clive Landis, principal of the KFL campus. I want to recognize the presence of His Excellency Yan Zhusheng, Ambassador of the People's Republic of China in Barbados. I believe that Professor Winston Moore, if he's not there already, he will join us later this morning because he said that he was going to do that. I want to recognize also the presence of Professor Li Zhusheng, Director of the Office of International Cooperation and Exchange at the CUPL, Ms. Li Dandan, an old friend of the Confucius Institute, Director of the Office of the Confucius Institute at CUPL, Professor Frederick Ochieng Odiambo, Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Education, and one of the principal presenters this morning, Professor Yu Zhuming, China University of Political Science and Law, who is the other main presenter this morning. We had extended a special invitation to Professor David Akombo, for several reasons, Dean of the Faculty of Culture and Creative and Performing Arts, and he will probably join us later this morning. Also, some additional persons mentioned to us, Deputy Dean Zhang of CUPL, Deputy Dean Lo of CUPL, Dr. Lei of CUPL, Dr. Liang of CUPL, interpreter, and Mrs. Ma of CUPL. Also, I would not be able to proceed without recognizing the presence of Co-Director Lee, Renyan Lee of the Confucius Institute, students who are participating or will join later, friends of the CI, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At this point, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the principal of the KFL campus, Professor Clive Landis, to give his remarks as we move through this event. Thank you very much, and over to Professor Landis.
His Excellency Yan Zhusheng, Ambassador of the People's Republic of China in Barbados, Professor Frederick Ochieng Odiambo, Dean, Faculty of the Humanities and Education, Professor Yu Zhiming, Dean, School of Humanities and Director, Religion and Law Research Center, China University of Political Science and Law, so CUPL, Professor Li Zhusheng, Director, Office of International Cooperation and Exchange, Ms. Li Dandan, Director of the Office of the Confucius Institute, those both at the CUPL, Professor David Akombo, Dean, Faculty of Culture, Creative and Performing Arts, co-directors of the Confucius Institute at Cave Hill, Mr. David Bulbulia and Renyan Li, students, friends of the Confucius Institute, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Zhao Shang Hao, and good evening Wan Shanghao. It was with great pleasure that I accepted the invitation to deliver remarks at the opening of this symposium in celebration of Confucius Institute Day and the Chinese National Day. Today, we are in for a very special treat as we bear witness to what I am sure will be two intellectually stimulating presentations. Professor Frederick Ochieng Odhiambo, Professor of African Philosophic Sagacity and Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the Kaiful campus, will present on the topic, The Relevance of Sagacity in Philosophy. And Professor Yu Zheming, Professor of Chinese Philosophy and also Dean School of Humanities and Director, Religion and Law Research Center of the CUPL, will make her presentation on Drawing Water by Jar or Machinery, the teachings of Zhuangzi. I take this opportunity to commend the Confucius Institute for its commitment in opening the dialogue between our respective humanities faculties. The exchange of letters in November last year opened the way for specific proposals to be developed, with today's symposium representing the first fruit of that cooperation. This symposium is but one in a long list of cooperative activities with our Confucius Institute partners in China. Indeed, from its very inception, the Confucius Institute has actively promoted cooperation between multiple faculties and departments of the Kaiful campus and the CUPL and other institutions in China. The Faculty of Law has held successful and highly competitive moot courts with its counterparts at CUPL in 2017, 2018, and 2022, along with a debating competition in 2019. Institutional cooperation in teaching has culminated in a Cave Hill law course, Introduction to Chinese Law and Institutions, being taught for 2 semesters by Dr. Yu Meng of the CUPL's law faculty, while conversely, the CUPL law course, Commonwealth Caribbean Law and Legal Systems, was taught this summer by Dr. Ronnie Yearwood of the Cave Hill campus's law faculty. In the Faculty of Social Sciences, moreover, it is expected that the course Introduction to China's Trade and Investment Law and Policy will be presented by Dr. Ru Ding, Associate Professor at the CUPL, beginning this month, following cooperative discussions with Dr. Janive Remy, Director of the Sridhar Ramphal Center for Trade Law, Policy and Services. Our Confucius Institute was also instrumental in facilitating contacts leading to an MOU on cooperation between the Kaiful campus's Faculty of Medical Sciences and the Chongqing Medical University, CQMU. The presentations and demonstrations on the topic of traditional Chinese medicine and traditional Caribbean medicine, held on November the 5th, 2021, were the initial outputs of this cooperation agreement. And discussions have extended most recently to the Faculty of Culture, Creative and Performing Arts, as the Confucius Institute continues to promote mutually beneficial linkages with a counterpart at the CUPL. We eagerly await the outcome of that newest cooperation. Today's symposium is therefore the latest harvest from the rich planting by our Confucius Institute in the fertile soil of mutual understanding and cooperation between Barbados and, by extension, the Caribbean and China. I believe our cherished Confucius Institute is living up to the tenets of that great Chinese philosopher when he wrote, "If you think in terms of a year, plant a seed. If in terms of 10 years, plant trees. If in terms of 100 years, teach the people." We can all be proud of the continued dedication of our Confucius Institute at the Cave Hill campus as it continues its mission to teach the people. I extend my very best wishes for a successful and illuminating symposium on the respective philosophical perspectives delivered by our distinguished deans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Principal. Thank you very much, Principal, for those words to launch our symposium today. And in particular, thank you for those words of appreciation and support to the Confucius Institute. And you can be assured that we will continue our work with your guidance in a like manner. Thank you very much. Now, I give the floor to the Ambassador of the People's Republic of China in Barbados, His Excellency Yan Zhusheng. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, David. Professor Clive Landis, Principal of the Cave Hill campus. Dean Professor Frederick Ocheng Odiabo, 张院长、张副院长、罗副院长、李处长，Dean Professor Yu Xueming, co-directors of the Confucius Institute of Cave Hill campus, teachers and students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good evening. It is my great pleasure to participate in conjunction with the Confucius Institute and our friends via internet to celebrate Confucius Institute Day as well as the China National Day on October the 1st. Since 2015, through the Confucius Institute of the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus, an average of more than 2,000 people from all walks of life have been provided with tutoring in Chinese language and culture every year. In addition, programs like the HSK Chinese Proficiency Test, the annual Chinese Bridge Competition, the Chinese Summer Camp, China Government Scholarship, the 2+2 programs jointly built by the China Suzhou High-Tech Company and UWI have all contributed to deeper understanding and mutual benefit between the peoples of China and Barbados. With more and more language and culture programs, such as Peking Opera, the Belt and Road Symposium, China Caribbean Trade Symposium, traditional Chinese medicine demonstrations and presentation. China in my eyes, one person, one dish. More Barbadian people have become enthusiastic fans of Chinese culture. The perspectives in philosophy academic symposium being held today in celebration of Confucius Institute Day and the Chinese National Day is very much in line with the theme of the day and is also a testament to the deepening and broadening of cultural exchanges between our two countries. Over the years, China has granted government scholarships to Barbados, and nearly 100 Barbadian youth have been to China in pursuit of higher education. The cooperation project between UWI and Chinese Suzhou High-Tech Company has made steady progress. More and more Barbadian and Caribbean youth have gone to China for education, exchange, and internship. A very positive development in the Charles F. Broom Memorial Primary School and the Lushan Primary School in China have forged a friendship and partnership. The students from the two schools interacted with each other through letters, the internet, and cultural activities. We look forward to more and more youth from both countries connecting to exchange and deepen mutual understanding. Dear friends, the Communist Party of China will convene the 20th National Congress in 9 days. This is a very important conference held at a critical moment as China is embarking on a new journey of building a socialist, modernized country in all-round way and making progress towards the second centenary goal. The conference will comprehensively summarize the major achievements and valuable experience of China's reform and development, fully grasp the new requirements for the development of China's course in the new era and new journey, and the new expectations of the people, and formulate programs of action and major policies. China will persist in realizing the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation through Chinese-style modernization and contribute wisdom and strength to world peace and development and the progress of human civilization. Friendship, which is derived from close contact between the two peoples, holds the key to sound state-to-state relations. People-to-people exchange will promote people-to-people bond and therefore advance the development of China-Barbados relationship continuously. Diversity spurs interaction among civilizations, which in turn promotes mutual learning and further development. I would like to extend my best wishes for the Confucius Institute Day and look forward to the fruitful results of the philosophical dialogue between the two scholars at today's symposium. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those words of support in helping us to launch this symposium. I would now like to invite all the participants to open their camera lenses so that we can take a screenshot of all the participants and those present here today. Please do so. And Grace, you could let us know when the shot is taken.
Yes, okay.
Still a few more to go.
Yeah, please, everybody open your camera. Yeah. Jima, you, yes, yeah.
Okay. A few more.
Okay. Jima, ready?
So we don't have Professor Ochieng.
Yeah.
A few people have stepped away from their computers. Okay, Professor is there now. Okay. Professor Moore, maybe he has stepped away.
Thank you, everyone.
Good. Good?
Good, you're good?
Okay,
okay, thank you very much. Okay. All right, Professor Ochieng, are you ready? I would like to introduce Professor Ochieng. Yes, we're hearing you but not seeing you. I see two Professor Ochiengs on my list here.
Can you see me now?
Yes, I can see you now.
I'm having some technical challenges. That's why I have two. I've opened my cell phone as well.
Okay.
But you can hear me now, right?
Yes, we can hear you now and see you now. Are you ready to proceed?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. We're not hearing you as clearly as before, though. So
No.
let's hear now.
Is it any better?
That is better. For me, at least, I would say
Okay.
that is better, yes.
Yeah, we heard. We
Okay.
heard.
All right.
Okay, good. All right. So we will now proceed. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our first presenter this morning. That is Professor Ochieng Odhiambo. He is a native of Kenya and is professor of African philosophic sagacity. He received his PhD from University of Nairobi in Kenya and previously taught at University of Nairobi, Consolata Institute of Philosophy, also at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, all in Kenya, and at the National University of Lesotho in Southern Africa. He is currently the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the Clearfield campus, University of West Indies. His research interest is in the area of African philosophy with a focus on philosophic sagacity. As an approach to African philosophy, philosophic sagacity was introduced into international philosophical circles in the 70s by Kenyan philosopher, Professor Odera Oruka. Today, the professor is one of the best-known researchers and leading exponents of the approach. Besides philosophic sagacity, Professor Ochieng Odhiambo's other research interests include moral and social philosophy as well as logic. So without further ado, I hand over to Professor Ochieng Odhiambo to make his presentation. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. So I'll speak and it will be translated, is it?
Yes, I should have mentioned that that you are invited to A, speak slowly, and B, pause as you proceed so that the translation can take place. So say some words and then pause for the interpreter to catch up with you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so it is my honor to make this presentation on this very important day. Now, the topic of my presentation, as you're all aware, is the relevance of sagacity in philosophy. Now, the best starting point of addressing the question of what philosophy is to look at the etymological origins of the term.
All's good. Interpreter?
Yes.
Interpreter is ready.
Interpretation?
Grace, interpreter?
Oh, sorry, I forgot.
Sorry,
I'm on mute. OK， 今天我要演讲的这个话题是哲学中睿智的相关性。要解决什么是睿，什么是哲学的问题，最好的出发点是研究该术语的词源。
Now, the word philosophy is derived from two Greek words, philos, which means loving, and sophia, which means wisdom. Therefore, philosophy means the love of wisdom. And a philosopher is a lover of wisdom and may be thought of as one who pursues wisdom just as a lover pursues his or her beloved.
哲学一词源于两个希腊词 ，philos 是爱的意思 ，sophia 是智慧的意思。因此，哲学的意思是爱智慧。哲学家是爱智慧的人，可以认为是追求智慧的人，就像一个人追求他所爱的人一样。
However, in modern times, the definition of or conceptualization of philosophy seem to have taken a different trajectory. It has become increasingly difficult for some individuals to visualize the connection between philosophy and wisdom.
然而，在现代，哲学的定义或其概念化似乎已经走上了一条不同的轨道。对一些人来说，越来越难以想象哲学和智慧之间的联系。
To such individuals, philosophy has become too lofty. Now, before outlining the position of such individuals, we will map out a current conception or perception within the academy of of what constitutes a philosopher, and by extension, what philosophy is.
对这些人来说，哲学已经变得过于高高在上了。在概述这些人的立场之前，我们将描绘出目前学术界对什么是哲学家以及什么是哲学的看法。
There is something that can be asserted about philosophers with a fair degree of certainty, truth, and accuracy. This is the fact that philosophers try to get others to accept what they have to say by thinking it through with them.
对于哲学家来说，有一些东西可以被断言为具有相当程度的确定性、真实性和准确性。这是一个事实，即哲学家试图通过与他人一起思考，让他人接受他们所说的东西。
They do so by considering the pros and cons of their views, by giving their arguments and the reasons behind their positions.
他们通过考虑他们观点的利弊，通过给出论据和立场背后的理由来做到这一点。
On the other hand, the philosopher, if in disagreement with your view, would also require you to clearly reason out your position. The philosopher would carefully listen to your arguments, not with the explicit intention to criticize you or belittle you, but to evaluate your view.
另一方面，哲学家如果不同意你的观点，也会要求你清楚地说明你的立场。哲学家会仔细聆听你的观点，不是直接批评或贬低他们，而是评估他们。
Therefore, the irreducible mark of philosophy is the question of rationalization and justification. Expressed differently, a philosophic mind is one that does not take things at their face value or for granted. It is a mind that is geared towards asking questions with the aim of comprehending.
因此，哲学不可复制的标志是合理化和正当化的问题。换一种说法，哲学思想是一种不以表面价值或理所当然的方式看待事物的思想，它旨在以理解为目的提出问题。
From the foregoing perception of a philosopher, it is safe to assert that philosophy, irrespective of any other way one may want to conceive it, must also be seen as a critical mental activity, a mental activity where reason plays a cardinal role.
从上述认识来看，可以断言，无论人们想以何种方式来构思，哲学都必须被视为一种批判性的心理活动，一种理性在其中起主要作用的心理活动。
It is therefore possible to come up with some irreducible characteristics of philosophy. The characteristics play a useful role in any meaningful definition of philosophy in the academic sense. In the synoptic form, the characteristics are
因此，我们有可能提出哲学的一些不可简化的特征，这些特征在学术意义上任何有意义的定义中发挥着有益的作用。这些特征的概括形式如下
：1. Philosophy is a reflective personal attitude towards life and the universe. 2. Philosophy is a method of reflective thinking and reasoned inquiry. 3. From its incisive and inclusive application of thought, it follows that philosophy is an attempt to gain a view of the whole.
1. 哲学是一种对生活和宇宙反思性的个人态度。2. 哲学是一种反思性思维和推理探究的方式。3. 从其对思想的敏锐和包容性的应用来看，哲学是一种试图获得整体观点的尝试。
4. philosophy is necessarily concerned with the logical analysis of language and the clarification of the meanings of words and concepts. 5, in yet another sense, philosophy is a group of problems as well as theories about the solutions to these problems. And lastly, 6, philosophy also deals with the systematic body of principles and assumptions underlying any particular field of experience or study.
4. 哲学必然关注语言的逻辑分析和对词语概念意义的澄清。5. 在另一种意义上，哲学是一组问题以及解决这些问题的理论。最后，哲学还涉及任何特定领域的经验或研究所依据的成系统的原则和假设。
The characteristics outlined constitutes what is referred to as philosophy in the strict or second-order sense. Some people refer to it as philosophy in the academic sense, since it is this aspect or sense of philosophy that interests students of philosophies, professional philosophers, and any other person who has an inquisitive and analytic bent of mind.
所概述的特征构成了严格意义上的哲学或二阶意义上的哲学，有些人把它称为学术意义上的哲学。正是因为哲学的这个方面引起了哲学生和专业哲学家以及其他任何有好奇心或分析倾向人的兴趣。
It is important to underscore the fact that philosophic thinking differs from ordinary thinking in one fundamental way, that it shares with the thought of the pure scientist. It employs concepts and abstractions, and in terms of these, formulate principles and laws.
重要的是要强调这样一个事实，即哲学思维与普通思维的不同之处在于它与纯粹科学家的思维有共同之处。它采用概念和抽象的方式，并根据这些概念和抽象来制定原则和规律。
That is what is ordinarily meant when philosophy, as well as the pure sciences, are referred to as theoretical pursuits. Philosophy and the pure sciences are both interested in formulating theories of a wide range of applicability.
当哲学与纯粹的科学家被称为理论追求时，这就是哲学通常的意思。哲学和纯粹的科学都对制定具有广泛适用性的理论感兴趣。
The ordinary thinker who is not philosophical does not often, especially, concern himself or herself with such abstractions and theoretical formulations.
不懂哲学的普通思想家往往不会特别关注这种抽象或理论上的表述。
The priest is not necessarily a religious philosopher. The lawyer is not necessarily a legal philosopher. The political theorist not necessarily political philosopher. The beautician not necessarily an aesthetician.
牧师不一定是宗教哲学家，律师不一定是法律哲学家，政治理论家不一定是政治哲学家，美容师也不一定是美学家。
The priest, the lawyer, the political theorist, and the beautician are interested primarily in specific objectives and in concepts and principles only insofar as they apply to a certain situation.
牧师、律师、政治理论家和美容师主要对具体的事物感兴趣，而对概念和原则的兴趣只在于它们适用于特定的情况。
The philosopher and the pure scientist, on the other hand, is interested primarily in concepts and principles, and only secondarily in their application. Whatever particular concepts and principles they are interested in, may very intimately be bound with activities and problems of their society.
另一方面，哲学家与纯粹科学家主要对概念和原则感兴趣，其次才是对其应用感兴趣。无论他们对什么特定的概念和原则感兴趣，都可能与他们社会活动和问题密切相关。
In ordinary reflective thinking, human beings think in terms of achieving this or that, winning this or that, gaining this or that. The philosopher and the scientist, however, is specifically interested not in a particular situation as such, but in the general concepts by means of which situations can be understood and dealt with.
在普通的反思性思维中，人类的思维方式是实现了什么，赢得了什么，获得了什么。然而，哲学家和纯科学家特别感兴趣的不是特定的情况，而是一般的概念。通过这些概念，可以理解和处理问题。
One can therefore generally infer that while the philosopher and the scientist are universal in outlook, the non-philosopher, the ordinary thinkers, operate at the particularist level.
因此，人们通常可以推断，哲学家和纯科学家的观点是普遍的，而非哲学家、普通的思想家则是在特定的层面上运作。
The philosopher functions more at the rarefied level, whilst the non-philosopher is a commonplace operative whose main interest and concern is the particular, the physical, the tangible.
哲学家更多的是在高层次上发挥作用，而非哲学家则是一个普通的操作者。他们的主要兴趣和关注点是具体的、物理的、有形的。
It is for this reason that a common belief amongst some individuals that there is no point studying philosophy, since all that philosophers do is operate high up in the air, well above the ground, and in their cogitations, they simply squabble over the meaning of words and concepts.
正因为如此，一些人普遍认为学习哲学是没有意义的，因为哲学家所做的一切都是在高空中运作，远远高于地面。在他们的思考中，他们只是在争辩单词和概念的意义。
They seem never able to come to any meaningful or practical consensus. They are, for instance, still arguing about the same problems that bedeviled the ancient Greeks.
他们似乎永远无法达成任何有意义的实际共识，例如，他们仍然在争论困扰着古希腊人同样的问题。
In this view, philosophy does not seem able to change anything at all, it is further argued. This, in my view, is without doubt a serious allegation, and all philosophers should see it as a challenge.
在这种观点中，有人进一步争辩道，哲学似乎根本无法改变什么。在我看来，这无疑是一个严重的指控，所有的哲学家都应该把它看作是一个挑战。
Do philosophers merely engage in hair-splitting exercises without any meaningful or practical purpose? As a student of philosophy, this, to me, has been the elephant in the room.
哲学家们是否只是在从事没有任何意义或实际目的的发散性练习？作为一个哲学生，对我来说，这一直是像关在房间里的大象。
Unfortunately, some contemporary philosophers have actually lent some credence to the view that philosophy has no practical utility by the way in which they define philosophy. In their definitions, they underscore the abstractness of philosophy, which in my view is a rather misguided supposition.
一些当代的哲学家通过他们定义哲学的方式，实际上为哲学没有实际效用的观点提供了一些证据。在他们的定义中，他们强调了哲学的抽象性，在我看来，这是被误导了。
The idea that philosophy must always operate at a higher rarefied level with deep metaphysical and epistemological abstractions is not always true. Descartes, for example, one of the greatest founders of modern Western philosophy, writes very simply and like an ordinary common sense thinker.
哲学认为必须始终在更高层次上运作，并具有深刻的形而上学和认识论的抽象性的想法，并不总是正确的。例如，现代西方哲学最伟大的奠基人之一笛卡尔，他的写作非常简单，就像一个普通的常识性思想家。
Now, in many ways, philosophy can be expressed very simply and with no metaphysical and epistemological mysteries. Some very fine philosophers are not as abstract as some people would wish them to be.
在许多方面，哲学可以被表达得非常简单，没有形而上学和认识论的神秘性。一些非常优秀的哲学家，并不像一些人认为的那样抽象。
Apparently, therefore, over time, philosophy seemed to have moved away from its Greek etymological definition of love of wisdom. Philosophy, in the academic understanding of the term, has tended to estrange itself from the Socratic partnership with wisdom, with the result that philosophers have proceeded in a manner in which they perfect their skills without caring about its practical utility.
显然，随着时间的推移，哲学似乎已经远离了它在希腊语中对爱智慧的定义。在对这个词的学术理解中，哲学倾向于疏远与智慧的苏格拉底式的伙伴关系，其结果是哲学家们以完善其推理技能的方式前进，而不关心或牺牲其实际效用。
They have become too theoretical and have tended to divorce philosophy from society and study the subject in a vacuum. Some of them have become the grave diggers of wisdom and truth. Little wonder some non-philosophers view philosophers with a lot of suspicion.
他们变得过于理论化，倾向于将哲学从社会中剥离出来，在真空中研究问题。他们中的一些人已经成为智慧和真理的掘墓人，难怪一些非哲学家对哲学家持怀疑的态度。
They consider philosophers to be individuals who are stuck to their armchairs in ivory towers, dreaming dreams that cannot be lived. They are perceived as people who cannot say anything sensible about problems of life. And this is an unfortunate state of affairs and is a challenge to all philosophers worth their salt. Because in truth, philosophy is, after all, for life and not the vice versa.
像被困在象牙塔扶手椅上的人，做着永远无法实现的梦。他们被认为是对生活中的问题说不出什么道理的人，这是一种不幸的状态，是对所有称职的哲学家的一种挑战。因为事实上，哲学毕竟是为了服务于生活，而不是恰恰相反。
Good. In order to restore the importance and relevance of philosophy, I've often emphasized the need to re-establish the connection between philosophy and wisdom, sagacity. Stated somewhat differently, the general project of philosophic sagacity, of which I'm an exponent, is an effort to bring back some of the lost glory of philosophy by emphasizing on sagacious reasoning or wisdom.
为了恢复哲学的重要性和相关性，我经常强调需要重新建立哲学与智慧之间的联系。换一种说法，我倡导的哲学智慧是通过强调睿智的推理来重拾哲学昔日的荣光。
In the project, a sage is simply defined as a person versed in the wisdoms and traditions of his people. However, when the definition is extended, then one must attach the ethical quality as an explicit and necessary component of the definition.
其中，智者被简单的定义为精通其民族智慧和传统的人。然而，当这个定义被扩展时，人们必须把道德品质作为一个明确和必要的组成部分。
The ethical quality underscores the practical aspect of philosophic sagacity. The thoughts of sages must be seen primarily as concerned with the ethical and empirical issues and questions relevant to the society, and the sage's ability to offer insightful solutions to some of these issues.
这种伦理品质强调了哲学智慧的实用性。圣人的思想必须首先被视为与伦理和经验问题有关，与社会相关，以及智者对其中一些问题提供有见地的解决方案的能力。
This therefore means that a sage, accordingly, has two qualities or attributes: insight and ethical inspiration. A sage is a wise individual who has insight but employs it for the ethical betterment of the community.
因此，这意味着智者相应的具有两种品质或属性：洞察力和伦理灵感。智者是具有洞察力的聪明人，并将其用于社会道德的改善上。
A philosopher may be a sage and vice versa, but many philosophers do lack the ethical commitment and inspiration found in the sage. A sage proper is usually the friend of truth and wisdom.
一个哲学家可能是一个智者，反之亦然。但许多哲学家确实缺乏智者的道德承诺和灵感。智者通常是真理和智慧的朋友。
A sage may suppress truth only because wisdom dictates, not because of some instrumental gain. Indeed, the ancient Greek definition of a philosopher as the lover of wisdom should have been reserved for a sage. One can assert that Socrates was actually wrongly labeled philosopher. He was, in my view, first and foremost a sage.
智者压制真理，只是因为智慧的需求，而不是因为某些工具性的利益。事实上，古希腊对哲学家的定义是爱智慧，这应该是留给智者的。可以断言，苏格拉底被错误地贴上了哲学家的标签。他首先是一个智者。
Socrates used philosophy only as a means to advance his sagacity and expose the hypocrisies of his time. But when all is said and done, one must still emphasize that sagacity and philosophy are not incompatible.
苏格拉底只是把哲学作为一种手段来提高他的智慧，揭露他那个时代的虚伪。但说到这里，人们必须强调，睿智和哲学并不是不相容的。
Another way in which I often argue and present the relationship between philosophy and sagacity is as follows. Sagacity consists of thoughts having or showing insight and good judgment. It is, therefore, thoughts of persons acknowledged as wise by their respective communities.
我经常论证和介绍哲学与智慧之间的关系，以另外一种方式。智慧包括具有或显示出洞察力和良好判断力的思想，因此它是被各自社会承认的具有聪明人的思想。
In yet another sense, sagacity is a body of basic principles and tenets that underlie and justify the beliefs, customs, practices of a given culture. Inbuilt in the second definition is the first, since it is the beliefs and thoughts of persons acknowledged as wise by their respective communities that, in essence, constitute the basis of that community's culture.
在另一种意义上，智慧是一套基本原则和信条，是特定文化的信仰、习俗和惯例的基础和理由。第二个定义中包含了第一个定义，因为正是被各自社会公认为有智慧的人的信仰和思想，在本质上构成了该社会的文化基础。
As I have already stated, it is important, therefore, to take cognizance of the fact that sagacity has two facets. In other words, there are two types of sages. One, a sage who is also philosophic. Two, a sage who basically mirrors the beliefs and traditions of his or her society.
如上所述，重要的是要认识到智慧有两个方面的事实。换句话说，存在两种类型的智者：一，同时具有哲理的智者；二，反映其所处社会时代所信仰的传统。
The thought of one of the sages, that is the latter type, though well-informed and educative, fails to go beyond the celebrated folk thought. Such a sage may not have the ability or inclination to apply his or her own independent, critical objections to folk belief.
后者的思想虽然很有见地，很有教育意义，但未能超过所谓的民间智慧。这样的智者运用他自己独立、批判性反对大众信仰。
He or she is therefore a folk sage in contrast to the other type, the philosophic sage. The folk sage is a master of popular wisdom, while the philosophic sage is an expert in didactic wisdom.
因此，他是一个智者，与另一类智者及与哲学圣人形成对比。民间智者是大众智慧的大师，而哲学智者是专家。
The folk sage, unlike his or her philosophic counterpart, operates squarely within the confines of his or her culture. For the folk sage, beliefs or truth claims within culture are generally treated as absolutes, not to be questioned. Anything outside his or her culture or contradictory to it is treated with indifference and at times even with hostility.
民间智者与他的哲学同行不同，完全是在他的文化范围内运作。对民间智者来说，文化中的信仰或真理主张通常被认为是绝对的，不受质疑。任何文化之外或者与之相矛盾的东西都会被无视，甚至被敌视。
Those sages or persons who are merely experts in the culture defend this philosophy and the structure of their society with the zeal of fanatical ideologists defending their political line.
那些智者或者仅仅是文化专家的人，狂热地捍卫这种哲学和社会结构、政治路线。
Sagacity consists of expressed thoughts of wise men and women in any given community, and more importantly, is a way of thinking and explaining the world that fluctuates between popular wisdom, that is, well-known communal maxims, aphorisms, and general common sense truths, and didactic wisdom, that is, an expounded wisdom and rational thoughts of some individuals within the community.
一般来说，如前所述，智慧由特定社会智者表达的思想组成。更重要的是，它是一种思考和解释世界的方式。在大众智慧，例如众所周知的公共格言、警句和一般常识性的真理，和说教智慧，例如社会内一些人阐述智慧和理性思想之间的波动。
While popular wisdom is often conformist, didactic wisdom is at times critical of the communal setup and popular wisdom. From this definition of sagacity, it follows that sagacity, just like typology of sages, has two main divisions: popular sagacity, or if you like, folk sagacity, and philosophic or didactic sagacity.
虽然大众智慧通常是墨守成规的，但说教智慧有时会批判公共设置和大众智慧。从这个智慧的定义来看，智慧就像智者类型学一样，有两个主要的划分：大众或民间智慧和哲学或者是说教的智慧。
In order to fully comprehend and perhaps appreciate the relationship between philosophy and sagacity, and therefore come to terms with the relevance of sagacity in philosophy, one should not lose sight of the distinction between a folk sage or a mere sage and a philosophic sage.
为了充分理解和认识哲学与智者之间的关系，从而认识到智者在哲学中的重要性，我们不应该忽视民间或者纯智者与哲学圣人之间的区别。
In another, though related sense, a sage is defined as a person who is well versed in the wisdoms and traditions of his or her community and has the capability of narrating them very faithfully to the finest detail. A sage acts as a mirror of his or her community's traditions.
在另一个相关的意义上，智者被认为是各自社会中有智慧的人，并且有能力非常诚实地论述细节。智者就像一面镜子，反映了他社会智慧和传统。
A philosophic sage, on the other hand, is one who has gone beyond folk or mere sagacity and attained a philosophic capacity. As a sage, he or she is versed in the beliefs and wisdoms of his people, but as a philosopher, he or she is rationally critical or opts for or recommends only those aspects of the beliefs and wisdoms that satisfy his or her rational scrutiny.
另一方面，哲学智者是一个已经超越了民间智者的人，达到了哲学的能力。作为一个智者，他精通其人民的信仰和智慧，但作为一个科学家，他是理性的批判者，只选择或推荐那些满足他理性审视信仰和智慧的方面。
At this juncture, I think it is important to bear in mind that the relationship between philosophy and sagacity should not be construed in terms of whether one is better than the other, but should be seen in terms of their complementing each other.
在这个时候，需要记住的重要一点是，哲学和智慧之间的关系不是比较哪一个更好来看待，而是从他们相互补充的角度来看待。
Kwame Nkrumah is noted to have surmised that there is a necessary synergy between thought and practice, that operation of one in the absence of other is futile. In his words, he asserted that thought without practice is empty, and action without thought is blind.
值得注意的是，恩克鲁玛推测思想和实践之间存在必要的协同作用，二者只有其一是无效的。
In Nkrumah's view, the ideal and desirable scenario demands that the two should accompany each other.
两者只有其一是无效的。他断言，思而不行是空，行而不思是盲目，两者相伴相随。
For our purposes, we want to rephrase Nkrumah's citation by replacing thought with philosophy and practice with sagacity.
出于我们的目的，我们想改写恩克鲁玛的引文，将思想替代为哲学，将实践替代为睿智。
The recast would therefore read as follows: philosophy without sagacity is empty, and sagacity without philosophy is blind. Herein lies the rationale of this presentation, that sagacity is relevant to philosophy, though it is also true that sagacity should not divorce itself from philosophy.
因此该写如下：没有睿智的哲学是空洞的，没有哲学的睿智是盲目的。结论即是，即睿智与科学相关，尽管睿智不应该脱离哲学，并且事实也是如此。
This symposium is in part a celebration of Chinese National Day, and I believe that it would be useful to mention that there exists a celebrated and influential Chinese intellectual in the person of Zhuangzi. The presentation of my next presenter, Professor Yu Xiaoming, will revolve around his thoughts. And that, ladies and gentlemen, members of the distinguished panel, that is the end of my presentation.
对，这次座谈会也是为了庆祝中国的国庆节，我相信谈一谈中国著名的知识分子庄子的情况也是非常有用的。我想强调的是，庄子是一位哲学圣人，这就是为什么除了被认为是哲学家以外，他还具有其他的品质。这些品质描述了他对解决困扰其社会问题的关注，是一个具有文化象征意义的人物。谢谢大家。
Thank you very much, Professor Ochieng Odiambo, for that very thought-provoking presentation. And there will come a time a bit later on for the question and answer and comments. And I look forward to that part of our discussion. Without further ado, now I hand over to my co-director, Dr. Lee Ryan, to make the introduction of the next presenter, Professor Yu Xiaoming. Over to you, Grace.
Thank you, Dean, for your excellent, insightful presentation. Now I'm going to introduce Professor Yu Xiaoming, the Dean of the School of Humanities and Director of the Center for the Study of Religions and Law in CUPL. Yeah, Professor Yu, a doctor in philosophy, is currently Dean of the School of Humanities and director of the Center for the Study of Religion and Law, China University of Political Science and Law. Her main research areas are religious studies and Chinese philosophy, with focus on Sui and Tang Buddhist philosophy, Tiantan Buddhism studies, and religion and law. Professor Yu has published books such as Philosophy and Religion in Ancient China, Zhanran Studies, taking the issue of the middle rise of Tiantai sect in the Tang Dynasty as a clue, and has published more than 50 academic papers. As it is a very brief introduction of Professor Yu, and now let's listen to Professor Yu. The floor is yours. 于老师请，有请于老师。Yeah, you have to. 你可以静音了。
Thank you, everyone. Good morning and good evening. It's my honor to have this chance to make my speech in these important days. Just now, Professor Ochieng has made an excellent speech about the relevance of sagacity in philosophy. Now I'm willing to tell a story by Zhuangzi. I will make my speech in Chinese. Now I should share my Photoshop. 可以看见吗，李老师？
可以的，没问题啊，谢谢。那我给你那个把翻译给你也那个什么一下，稍等一下。
李老师，现在可以开始吗？
可以了啊，对不起。
好的，我现在发言的这个题目呢是，问和诘告，庄子的选择。
The topic of my speech today is drawing water by well sweet, or by drawing water by jar or by well sweet. Teachings from Zhuangzi.
庄子呢，他是生活在2400年前的中国，在战国中期的先贤庄子和他的学生的作品集。
Zhuangzi is a collection of works and later studies penned by the sage Zhuangzi, who lived in the middle of the Warring States period, which occurred about between 480 BC and 221 BC, about 2,400 years ago.
在庄子中，他经常用夸张的寓言来表达自己的思想。
In the Zhuangzi, he is renowned for often using exaggerated fables in order to express his thoughts.
他讲的故事往往意味深长，蕴含着他对世界的认识和自己独特的哲学主张，迄今仍然具有启发意义。
The stories he tells are often profound, not only embodying his knowledge of the world, but also his own unique philosophical positions, many of which, to this very day, still provide a joy to inspiration.
今天我们讲的故事叫《问与诘告》的故事。
Today, we shall be discussing the fable of the jar and the well sweet.
这个故事记载于《庄子外篇》的天地篇。
This story is recorded in Zhuangzi, Heaven and Earth.
这个故事托名儒家孔子的门人子贡，他在从楚国返回晋国的路上，在汉水之南遇到一个老人在灌溉菜园子。
The story goes by the name of Zigong, who was a Confucian disciple. He was on his way back to Jin from Chu and met an old man who was irrigating his vegetable garden in the south of the Han River.
这个老人开凿了一个通向井的小道，每次都抱着这个罐子下井打水。
The old man dug a path leading to the well, yet every time he carried a jar into the well to fetch water.
子贡见了这个现象，认为这个老人呢是用力甚多而见功寡，所以很善意的提醒他，可以利用更为高效的诘告。
Zigong saw the old man and thought that he was using a lot of energy, yet getting very little result. So he kindly reminded him that he could use the more efficient well sweet.
这个诘告是一种采用杠杆原理节省体力、提高劳动效率的集水工具。这是农业社会的一项伟大发明，在中国的春秋时期已经流行。
The well sweep was a water drawing tool that used the lever principle to conserve one's physical strength while improving labor efficiency. It was an innovative invention of an ancient agricultural society and had gained popularity in China during the spring and autumn periods.
诘告是用木头做成的，后端重，前端轻。取水的时候，用手拉着钓竿往井下垂，诘告的横木前端就往下浮。放手的时候，钓竿往上升起，横木的前端就上扬，水就像被人从井里提到田上一样，省力高效，非常方便。
The structure itself was made of wood with a heavy rear end and a light front end. When fetching water, one would pull the boom down to the well by hand, which would cause the front end of the crossbar to slump up. Upon letting go, the boom would rise, causing the front end of the crossbar to lift up. The overall effect was one where it appeared that the water was lifted from the well to the field, a truly labor-saving, efficient, and very convenient piece of machinery.
但是老人并没有接受子贡的建议。
However, the old man did not accept Zigong's recommendation in the least.
从表面上看，这个故事反映了两种对技术的态度。子贡和老人分别代表着两方，一方主张充分利用技术的成果， 改善生活，另一方则选用了另一种简易的技术成果问，但主动规避乃至批判技术成果截告的使用。
On the surface, the story seems to reflect two attitudes towards technology. The Gong and the old man represent two different perspectives, two parties. One advocates making full use of technological achievements to improve life, while the other chooses another simple technological achievement, the jar, the urn, but actively avoids and even criticizes the use of technological achievement, the well suite.
那么庄子是想用这个小故事表达什么思想呢？我们需要结合庄子所处的时代来看。
Thus, what thought is Zhuangzi truly wishing to express through this fable? To answer this question, we must first cast this fable against the background of the historical era in which Zhuangzi would have lived.
汤因比在历史研究中曾经提出，文明的样态取决于挑战和应战。庄子所处的时代是中国早期历史上最为动荡的时期。当时面对的挑战，不仅仅是自然界频频发生的天地异象、灾祸，而且更重要的是事易时移、法久必生、周文凋敝，已运行数百年的制度、文化、道德、宗教、治理理念已经没有力量统摄整个世界。
Toynbee's A Study of History once proposed that the shape of civilization depends on challenges and facing challenges. Zhuangzi lived in one of the most turbulent times in early Chinese history. The challenges faced at the time were not only limited to natural anomalies and disasters, but more importantly, changing times of the world, the long-term abuse of the law, and the withering of the Zhouwen, which is a system of ritual ceremony of the Zhou dynasty, which had been in operation for hundreds of years. Institutions, culture, morality, religion, and governance as concepts were powerless to unify this ancient world system.
古老的中国大地被变法、兼并、争霸战争裹挟，处于不确定的动荡之中。
The ancient land of China experienced continual reforms, mergers, and wars for hegemony, and existed in a persistent state of uncertain turmoil.
经过春秋时期的大变动，几百个小国逐渐兼并为7个大国和他们周围的10几个小国。
After the great changes in the spring and autumn period, hundreds of small countries gradually merge into 7 large countries with a dozen or so smaller countries around them.
期间，36名君主被城下或敌国所杀，52个诸侯国被灭，大小战事发生480多起，人们急需结束战争，回归国泰民安的和平状态。
During this period, 36 monarchs were killed by their subjects or enemy states. 52 vassal states were destroyed, and more than 480 wars occurred. People urgently needed to end the wars and return to a peaceful state of national prosperity and peace.
各国都努力构建新的道德、法律、政治权力系统，以及与之相适应的思想文化，试图成为霸主或统一者。这种时局又促进了中国知识阶层士的形成，并且这些士兼物与治，纷纷提出自己的社会批判主张和取合诸侯的各种治理方略，形成了诸子百家争鸣的思想繁荣局面，也造就了中国哲学关注现实，以治为核心议题的学术品格。
As a result, all countries strive to build new systems of morality, law, and political power, as well as a compatible accompanying ideological in an attempt to become a hegemon or unifier. This current situation also promoted the foundation of the Chinese intellectuals class. The scholar and the scholars all serve governance. Thus, according to the feudal lords, these scholars would have put forward their own social criticisms, propositions, and various governance strategies, giving rise to the formation of various government strategies. The ideological prosperity of the contention of the 100 schools of thought also created the academic character of Chinese philosophy into one which paid attention to reality and took governance as its core issue.
先秦诸子都重视人在制造体系中的支撑作用，以人为本，以人为贵，是中国传统哲学的一个核心理念。
The pre-Qing scholars all attached great importance to the supporting role of people in the governance system. Putting people first and valuing the people became a core concept of the traditional Chinese philosophy.
儒道两家是中国哲学最为重要的两个流派，他们在文化精神上互相补益，对于中国社会和文化影响巨大，但他们对什么是需要坚持和成就的人形成了两种不同的取向。
Confucianism and Taoism were two of the most important schools of Chinese philosophy. They complemented each other in cultural spirit and have had a huge impact on Chinese society and culture. However, they formed two different orientations about what were the necessary trappings of persistence and achievement needed to constitute a person.
儒家代表了知识阶层中有为的一支，强调知其不可而为之。
Confucianism represented the active branch of the intellectual class, emphasizing taking action even when you know it is impossible.
他们直接以人的教育为入手点，以得天下英才教育之为乐，把培养仁爱的君主和有德行的君子作为治理天下、保持世界生生不息的保障。
They directly started with the education of people, considering the education of world talents to be a joy, and taking the cultivation of benevolent monarchs and virtuous gentlemen as the guarantee for governing the world and keeping the world alive or functioning.
与庄子同时，稍后儒家孟子提倡以仁义与禽兽的仁义礼智之善端为人的本质属性。荀子强调人有气、有生、有知且有义，故人最为天下贵，以人能群、人善驾万物为人的重要特点和优势。
At the same time as Zhuangzi, the later Confucian Mencius advocated the goodness of benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom, which made humans different from animals, or humans are different from animals, as the essential attributes of human beings. Sunzi emphasized that people have qi, life, knowledge, and righteousness, so people are the most valuable in the world, and people can group together and cooperate. Thus, virtuous people can use the power of all things in the universe as the important characteristics and advantages of people or humans.
而以老子、庄子为代表的道家学派，则以社会的清醒者、旁观者的面目出现，提醒着天下熙熙，皆为利来；天下攘攘，皆为利往的世人。
The Taoist school, represented by Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, appeared as a sober bystander in society, reminding the world people under the sky flock to each other for the sake of interests, and to go to each other for the sake of those interests.
庄子继承了老子的基本立场，注重对于世界的本质进行反思，对于人的有为进行约束，崇尚顺应天道、全性保真的宝光之道，认为自然素朴无为的状态是世界的根本机制，道的原初状态是人和人类社会要效法的。
Zhuangzi inherited Lao Tzu's basic position, which was focused on reflecting the nature of the world, restraining the actions of human beings by advocating ways that conform to the Tao, which is known as the way or the path of heaven, and believing that the state of nature, simplicity and inaction, is the original state of Tao, And the Tao, being the fundamental mechanism of the world, is something that humans and human society should follow.
全性保真的人安时处顺，最符合大道流行、万物化生的特点，也最符合人性原初的需求，是让世界还原简明澄澈的生存状态的基础。
A person who is full of fidelity stays at peace, is most in line with the characteristics of the Tao's polarity and the transformation of all things. It is also the most in line with the original needs of human nature. It is the basis for restoring the world to a concise and clear state of life.
在庄子中呢，他通过子贡的口，区分了两种圣人之道，一种是儒家重视的积极有为的圣人之道，事求可，功求成，用力少，建功多者圣人之道。
Zhuangzi distinguishes two variations or types of the way of the sage. One is the way of positive action, which Confucianism attaches great importance to. The way of the sage, which is seek to do things that are feasible and seek to achieve merit. To use less effort and to obtain more efficiency is the way of the sage.
另一种是道家的圣人之道，执道者得权，得权者行权，行权者神权，神权者圣人之道也。
The other is the Taoist sage's way. Those who follow the Tao are complete in virtue. Those who are complete in virtue are complete in form. And those who are complete in form are complete in spirit. Those who are complete in spirit are the way of the sage.
两者都是圣人之道，但两种圣人各有区别。
Both are a way of the sage, but there exist fundamental differences between the two types of sages.
道家更重视天道的自然性，认为天地不言无为，是大地上万物自然生长、生生不息的根本，而与之相应，人应该坚持保全真心、单纯，才能与道为一。
Taoism pays greater attention to the naturalness of the Tao of heaven and believe that the non-speaking or non-verbal and non-action way of heaven and earth are the foundation for the natural and continuous growth of all things on the earth. Thus, correspondingly, people should insist on preserving sincerity and simplicity in order to be in harmony with Tao.
我们回到故事中，故事里的问和结告是两个隐喻的意象。庄子见老人之口，表达了这样的一个观点。
Okay. So the drawer and the well sweep alluded in the story are two metaphorical images. Through the words of the old man, Zhuangzi wished to express the following point of view. For example, with machinery and the like, there must be things like wit or cleverness, and there must be things like ideas and mechanics.
庄子认为机械、机事、机心存在着直接关联，如果追求功利技巧，必忘乎人之心。而子贡建议使用的告，正是以机心为基础的技术发明，因而老人拒绝使用。
Zhuangzi believed that there is a direct relationship between machinery, opportunity, and wit. If you pursue utility and ingenuity, the fame and fortune, wit, and cleverness will certainly not be put on their kind of people's hearts. The well sweep suggested by Segong is a technical invention based on the mechanical heart, as wit literally translates to mechanical heart. It is because of this that the old man refused to use it.
先秦诸子很重视初始条件和细节的积累对后续发展的影响。
Preaching philosophers attach great importance to the influence of initial conditions and the accumulation of details on subsequent development.
比如《周易》所说的“君子胜始，差若毫厘，谬以千里”，列子中指出的愚公移山，《战国策》提及的“急于成舟， 群卿折肘。韩非子提出的千丈之堤，以蝼蚁之血溃，百池之始，以突隙之先缝等。庄子也是如此。
As mentioned in the Book of Changes, a gentleman should be cautious about storytelling. Even though the difference is as small as a millionth, it may spell 1,000 miles of error. Lieza pointed out that the foolish man moves mountains. Warren State's policy by Wade C. mentioned that the accumulation of feathers may likely lead to the sinking of a boat. And Han Fraser proposed that 1,000 jang, a jang is a unit of measurement, 1,000 jang dike can collapse from an anthole. 100-foot room can burn with the smoke of a gap. Zhuangzi is also of similar disposition.
庄子认为，一旦人的机心藏于心中，这个心就无法保持纯净无染的状态，进而就会使得人的精神不能保持安定，心就无法成为道的载体。而人如果以巧斗力，争胜求名，就不能真正的治生，不能治生就不能治天下。
Zhuangzi believed that once a person's scheme or wit or cleverness is hidden in the heart or placed in the heart, this heart cannot be made in a pure and untainted state, which in turn will cause the spirit or soul to be unable to maintain stability. Thus, such an unstable heart would be unable to act as a receptacle of the Tao. If people fight with strength or rely on cleverness to win, and strive for victory and fame, they cannot truly govern the body. If they cannot govern the body, they cannot govern the world.
庄子的自身，也就是存己，在自己身上先确立道德修养，只做与自己心智一致的事，不被天下的是非褒贬所干扰，这样才能够拥有从容自在、宠辱不惊的定力，成为全德之人。
Zhuangzi's governance of the body or mastery of oneself first establishes the self-cultivation of Tao in oneself, where one only does things that are consistent with one's own aspirations and is not disturbed by the world's definition of right and wrong. It is only in this way that one can have the calm and unflinching determination to become a person of all virtues.
反之，人一旦起了机心，在天下的名利非欲面前，就不能坚持做自己，心性飘忽不定，终究为万物所控制和伤害。庄子称这种人为风波之民。
On the other hand, once a person has esteem or cleverness or wit and is affected by the world's concepts of fame, fortune, and infamy, he can't insist on being himself. His mind is erratic, for after all, he is controlled and injured by external things.
当然，在庄子的体系里，老人达到的境界还不是最高的境界，真正最高的境界是混沌数的达成，那是无为，返归自然，体性报神，达成了普，成就了无代的境界，泯然于芸芸众生中，人们已经无法辨识了。
But in Zhuangzi's philosophical system, the realm reached by the old man is not the highest realm. The real highest realm is the achievement of chaos art, which is the return of inaction to nature. The body nature holding God, the attainment of simplicity, and the achievement of the state of no waiting, which is lost in the mass of beings and is no longer recognizable to people.
庄子推崇这种全德之人，不是采用粗暴的命令式的道德规训，而是在关注人的认知和能力有限性的基础上，强调在认知上要超越处境的限制，让自己从更为高远乃至自然天道的角度，平等的看待世界上的每一个事物，事物无论高下，都是道的载体。
Zhuangzi's respect for people of all virtues is not founded on the basis of using heavy-handed, imperative moral disciplines, but instead on the basis of paying attention to people's cognition and limited ability, emphasizing that cognition must transcend the limitations of the situation, allowing oneself to view the world from a loftier and even more natural perspective. We are then able to look at everything in the world equally. For whether things are superior or inferior, they are all equally carriers of Tao.
庄子区分了以道观之和以物观之两种认知方式。以道观之万物一业，以物观之自贵而相见。以道观之物无贵贱，以物观之自贵而相见。
Zhuangzi distinguishes two ways of cognition, viewing things in terms of things, the material or the corporeal, and viewing things in terms of the Tao. From the perspective of Tao, all things are one. But from the perspective of things, inequality arises.
从物的世界看世界，往往高看自己，如井底之蛙，居于一隅，只看到自己的天地，以自己的天地为天下，把自己看作是重要的、值得重视和尊敬的，忽略乃至轻贱他人的他物的价值。
Looking at the world from the perspective of things, we tend to think highly of ourselves, like a frog at the bottom of a well, stuck in one corner, only seeing our own world, taking our own world as the entire world, seeing ourselves as important, worthy of attention and respect, and ignoring, even despising, the value of others and other things.
而用道的视角看，天地与我并生，而万物与我为一，万事万物都有其自然本然的样子，世界是多元并存，各美其美，生生不息的。
From the perspective of Tao, heaven and earth coexist with me. All things and I are one. This is from Zhuangzi equalization. Everything has its natural appearance, and it becomes clear that the world is multidimensional, multifaceted coexistence of various beautiful and everlasting entities.
无论是9万里长空中逍遥的鲲鹏，还是跳起即落地的小雀，都是时也、命也、运也的产物，各有所长，也各具其短，由其依思的力量，也有需要日积月累方能形成的条件。
Whether it is the kunpeng, which is a type of bird, who is free and easy in the 90,000-mile sky, or the little bird that jumps and falls to the ground, they are all products of time, fate, and destiny, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, and its own basis of evaluation. The power to rely on waiting also has conditions that need to be accumulated over time.
因而，人应该慎重而珍重地对待自己的身心，不以机心伤害自己的自然天性。对待万事万物，也应该保持一种随顺、尊重、欣赏的态度。
Therefore, people should treat their body and mind with caution and value and endeavor to not injure their nature with scheming, wit, or cleverness. Instead, they should maintain an attitude of obedience, respect, and appreciation for everything.
回到故事来说，庄子并不是反文明论者，也不反对技术的发明和运用。
Going back to the story, Zhuangzi was not an anti-modernist, nor was he against the invention and application of technology.
桀骜是技术的成果，问也是文明的结晶。
The well sweep was the result of technology, as was the jar or the urn was equally the crystallization of civilization.
庄子强调的是人能够善于利用外物，而不被外物所依死，不被外物所异化，保持物而不物与物的自主和自由。
What Zhuangzi emphasized was that people can make good use of external things without being enslaved by said things, thus not being alienated by external things, and maintaining the mentality where one harnesses things without being things. This is from Zhuangzi, Mountains and Trees.
问增长了人的能力，但人依然是行为和能力的主体，而桀骜则从减少人的劳动出发，激发了人的机心，长此以往，失之毫厘，谬以千里。
The earn increase people's ability, but the people are still the main locus of behavior and ability, therefore they still have agency. Whereas the well sweep, through reducing people's labor, artificially stimulates people's ingenuity. The old
老人拒绝用桀骜，正是用不采用机式提醒人们不起机心的重要性。
The old man refused to use the well sweep because it is precisely by not using schemes or weight that he aims to remind people of the importance of not using schemes or weight.
因而，一方面，庄子用问惑桀骜的故事，讲述了他的生命观和天道观，提倡对于多样化的生命和世界本身的尊重和保全，尤其是对自己纯真天然的自由身心的保全，不用心思损害道，也不用人为改变自由的自由自在。
Therefore, on the one hand, Zhuangzi used the story of the urn and the well sweep to describe his outlook on life and the Tao of heaven, advocating respect and preservation of the diverse lives and the world itself, especially the preservation of the pure and natural freedom of body and mind.
另一方面，庄子在他的天道观和生命观的释喻中，为技术的发明和利用划定了边界，即要以不违背天地万物之道，不伤害人自身的自在身心为基础，要保持人物物而不物与物的活泼泼的主体能力。
While on the other hand, in his view of the Tao of heaven and that of life, Zhuangzi drew a clear boundary between the invention and utilization of technology. That is, that the use of technology based on the freedom of body and mind, which does not violate the way of heaven, earth, and all things, and does not harm people's own self, thus maintaining their ability to be the subject of agency. Therefore, they harness things without being things.
庄子的这种思想，既是人类文明在自身发展中的自觉反思，在科技高度发达、无所不在、无所不为的今天，依然具有警醒和启发意义。
Zhuangzi's thought on this matter is not only a conscious reflection on the development of human civilization, but also, even to this very day, still acts as a cautionary tale of inspiring significance in the highly scientifically and technologically developed societies of the modern world.
不知道在欧强教授的这个体系中，像庄子这样的一个哲人，他是否可以称之为具有睿智的这样一个哲学家
？I am not quite sure if in Professor Oqiang's philosophical system, if Zhuangzi, who is this type of philosopher, could become a wise philosopher, a wise philosopher.
谢谢。
A philosophical sage, sorry, philosophical sage. I believe that was a question for Professor Oqiang.
Thank you.
Well, it seems we've come to the end of the presentation by Professor Yu. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Yu, for that wonderful presentation. And before we move on to the question and answer session, I would just like to say that certainly the Confucius Institute would make the recording of this entire event available, I believe, Grace, either through our YouTube link or on request us here at the Confucius Institute, we'll be able to send it to you or direct you to where it can be found. or it would also be available at our web page, which is available through the KFIL campus website. So now we'll move on to the question and answer session and discussion. And if you have a question to put to the two professors, you could raise your hand or simply indicate that you would wish to present a question or make a comment to them. So the floor is now open. Floor is now open.
Any question? Yeah, 张老师。
Yes, graph no problem.
Problem, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
Who will be the first?
Yeah, the graph,
sure.
I think David, you can tell who go first.
Yeah.
Okay, Grafton. I'm only seeing Grafton. And
Yes,
then
thanks.
Professor Zhang also raised his hand.
Professor John. Okay, okay. I'm missing the hand. Okay, go ahead, Grafton, please.
Yes, go.
Water Wendy Jiao swimming.
Grafton is
Conzi.
one of our students, learned Chinese for several years.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please. Sorry.
Water Wendy, sure. Confucius. Jiao, Haisha. Georgia.
Do we have an interpretation for?
Yeah.
for the-
Taran, if you can interpret.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Water Wendy. A question. Confucius. Sure. Georgia. Haisha. Jiger. It's
你
Confucius.
说的汉语吗？你说
Confucius.
对，他说孔子是哲学家还是智者？然后他问的是于教授，
你问于老师是吗？还是问我天？
是哲学家还是
？Yeah。
好，我可以回答，还是等一下一起回答？
好。So, Professor, you can answer, but she'll answer in a bit after we get more questions.
More questions. Okay, so now we go to Professor Zhang to get his question. We'll probably take 3 questions and then ask the professors to make their response. So, Professor Zhang.
Well, thank you very much for the talk. So it's my turn to read the question, right?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's a very illuminating speech about the relationship between philosophy and sagacity. I think Professor Frederick Odhambo gave a very wonderful speech. So my question for Professor Odhambo is that you mentioned that a sage may suppress truth only because wisdom dictates, not because of some instrumental gain. Yeah, this is your words. So my question is, why a sage will suppress truth? Because normally we would think that a sage will pursue the truth, but not to suppress the truth. So what's the reason? So this is my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Zhang. I also see the hand raised by Alex and Eva.
I actually have 2 questions, one for each presenter.
Professor.
Right. My first question for Professor Odhiambo is, you said that sages are sometimes territorial about their particular brand of philosophy, and that's because they are widely connected to the community as opposed to maybe more academic philosophers. And considering that you do African philosophy and we're from the Caribbean, where we have experienced our, how do you say, our acceptance of foreign things, sometimes to our detriment. How would a sage accept the foreign ideas or the foreign philosophies from other places or from other territories, but still keep their traditional information and protect their traditional view of philosophy? So that's my question for Professor Ochieng. And my question for Professor Yu is, 我觉得哲学是很多次我们觉得哲学是一个老人的一个事情，但是我们比如说庄子还有孔子，其实他们的话还有很多我们可以学习的，知道我们的生活或者什么的。但是我觉得可能年轻人不喜欢学习这样的哲学，这样的东西，所以你觉得呢？我们可以提倡那个哲学，或者提倡庄子、孔子这样的学家，你觉得怎么提倡呢？
Thank you very much, Alex. I know we have our questions lined up from Grafton and also from Alex and Eva and also Professor Zhang. Over to the presenters. I don't know who wants to go first, whether Professor Yu or Professor Ochieng Odhiambo.
Yes, I can go first.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
I can go first, right. In my case, I think there are two questions for me. One has to do with why should a sage suppress truth, right? Now, the point is you should not see it, okay, a sage is also interested in truth, right? But then he's also interested in the good of society, right? So that in a case, in a situation, right? In a situation where the truth seems to contradict or go against, is in opposition with the general good, then the sage will go for the general good rather than sticking with the truth, because his concern is the general well-being of the community. Right? So for instance, if the truth, just as an example, if the truth would lead to the killing of many people, right, he would try and go around that truth for the benefit of the common good, so to speak. Right? So it's not that he is averse to truth. It's only in cases where it contradicts the common good, then he'll go with the general good, as opposed to an armchair philosopher, if I may call it like that. That one will go after truth, that even if it means is something which would be very detrimental to the community, the armchair philosopher would stick with the truth. The sage would go with the common good. But take note, the way the sage would put it would be, he would recognize the truth, right? But say that, okay, for the sake of a common good, this is how we should go, so to speak, right? Now on acceptance of foreign doctrines, I would say that now, you see, that's why I make the distinction between a folk sage and a philosophic sage, right? You see, a folk sage is the one who will defend, right, the dictates of his culture, come what may, the folk sage, right, because he's grounded on that. But a philosophic sage need not, always go with what the community has. So as my co-presenters put it, a philosophic sage would also assess the situation and see what is to the benefit of the community, and will go with that. So for instance, because we know there's a sense in which when I was giving the characteristics of philosophy, I said that philosophy also has to do with the basic fundamental principles underlying the community, right? So in a situation where some principles have outlived their usefulness, right? Then a philosophic sage would actually recommend that they be adjusted accordingly, right? So in other words, a philosophic sage would also, recommend changes within the community. But the point is that the basis of that foundation, right, of that society, right, okay, should be the mainstay, so to speak. But if adjustments are necessary, then you go that route. But those principles should be explicated, because the danger which we have realized is that, you see, some societies, for instance, African societies, right, you find that because of the colonial legacy, they have abandoned some of the basic principles which underlie their communities, and it has been to the detriment of their societies, right? Because because of colonialism, they are not familiar with the basic underlying principles. A philosophic sage would say, all right, these are our principles, right? But the situation has changed such that we should adjust some of these principles. So for instance, just as an example, right? In African communities, some African communities practice polygyny, so to say, polygyny, right? Where you have one man, many wives, right? You see, in a typical traditional setup, that would work, right? But you see, in a modern setup, that becomes problematic. So a philosophic sage would recognize that and say that that one is now, it has outlived its usefulness in this society. So let's adjust it accordingly, right? So the philosophic sage is amenable to adjustments and recommends adjustments which would lead to the common good. Okay, over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your answer. And now over to Professor Yu for her response.
I could see you smiling.
I'm not going to say a word. Over to you, Professor Yu.
Thank you. I will answer my question in Chinese, so I should let my young colleague Liang Cheng to translate for me. Yeah. 刚才说的这个问题哈，可能涉及到一个非常基础性的问题，就是什么是哲学。这个也是这个100多年来，在中国的学术界一直在讨论的一个问题。那这个问题呢，最重要的当然我们现在所讲的现代的学术体系是发展于这个西方，那用西方的这样一个学科体系来回溯到这个其他的文化、其他的民族它的这个学术体系的话，难免会有一个用什么样的标准来核定这个概念的问题。这是一个。第二个呢，就是这100多年来我们在讨论的一个很大的问题，就是中国有没有哲学或者说中国的哲学应该是什么样。那就我自己本人而言因为我自己是做中国哲学研究的，所以我肯定会认为中国有哲学那么在我们中国哲学的体系里面，老子、孔子都是中国哲学学科里面的重要的代表人物那么在这一点上面呢，我觉得就是说，因为我们这个汉语体系和英语和那个字母文字的这个体系有很大的差别。如果说用一些标准去衡量它是否一个哲学体系的话，我可能比较容易接受，比如说批判性比如说抽象性比如说基于概念基础之上的系统思考如果从这几个标准来看的话，那老子也好，孔子也好，他们是有非常丰富发达的一个哲学体系的。他们不仅仅是提出一些片段性的伦理性的一个论断， 来说明呢这个来为这个社会的伦理道德提供一个支撑。实际上，他们是既具有一个对于这个社会的批判，对于概念体系的批判啊。所以呢，就是如果我们仔细去看那个在汉语体系里面去理解比如刚才老师提出来的这个孔子是哲学家还是智者的问题的话，那么孔子在这里面是有非常清晰的这些概念，比如说名实关系问题名本身它就是一个概念，名和与名概念相对应的这样的一个这个内容内涵这个名实关系它是有非常清晰的一个论证的。那从它的证明理论另外比如说人我们一般讲孔子的基本思想观念，这个人他不是一个道德的一个说教，而是有个非常清晰的概念辨析，在此基础之上搭建的一个儒家的学术体系当然也包括孝这个过去的这个孝顺的孝，看起来是一个伦理概念，但它是一个很清晰的概念。这个概念要区别于原来在周文体系里面的，就是周的文化体系里面的一个孝的概念以及呢要更多的强调与在当时的社会里必须要有的内外一致的诚后来发展出来的诚的这样一个系统，要强调敬这个要敬，而且这个人本身他也是在原有的礼的体系中的一个内在基础一些情感基础，所以它的概念系统本身它既带有一个批判性，又带有一个概念的反思和那个界定性并且不管是在孔子还是老子或者其他的中国的哲学思想家里面，它是有非常系统的这样的一个思考的。我们完全可以给它就是架构出就是把这个系统的这个东西呢给它重新梳理出来。我们之所以看它那个是片段性的，很大程度上是因为对汉语体系，尤其古汉语体系里的这些概念名词，就是缺乏一个细密性的考察细密性的理解。所以呢，就是我觉得就是在这一点上中国哲学包括孔夫子在内，他们他的哲学体系，我觉得是可以跟西方的很多哲学体系比美的。当然，刚才那个这个欧强教授也提到了这个推理的这样一个智慧。那么确确实实不一定每个哲学家，尤其是中国的哲学家在推理，就是尤其在论述的过程中都是条分缕析的推理，不一定是他们表达的一个方式。但是在这一点上面我们也可能会做出一个另外的一个回应，比如说尼采，他算不算一个哲学家？如果尼采可以作为哲学家中的一员的话，那么我觉得孔夫子的他的一个表达方式肯定就至少不会比尼采更不像个哲学家。这是当然也对这个问题的一个简单的回应我想请翻译或者说请那个这个刚才的翻译老师或者说我们的梁成帮着来做一个这个英语的翻译，谢谢
Okay.
Thank you, Professor. Could we?
I'll try my best to interpret Professor Yu's answer. As I understand it, the question has to do with a very fundamental question, that is, what is philosophy? This question actually has to do with a hotly debated topic, a topic which has been hotly debated for about 100 years in the Chinese academia. And this topic often takes the form of the question, is there true philosophy in China? Or the so-called Chinese philosophy, is the so-called Chinese philosophy genuine philosophy or not? And as I mean, Professor Yu, understand it, true philosophy should have at least should meet at least three criteria, namely abstractness, critical character, and a systematic character. judged by these standards, I think ancient Chinese thinkers such as Confucius, Lao Tzu, and Zhangzi all have their own systematic account and criticism of the societies in which they lived. They not only have their own teachings on various topics, but they also have well-ordered systems of concepts and well-articulated arguments for their teachings and doctrines. So if Nietzsche, writing the way he did, could count as a philosopher, I don't think there are strong reasons against saying that Confucius was a philosopher. So I do think that the concept of Chinese philosophy is valid, and Confucius was a philosopher. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Any other raised hands at this point? I see one from Professor Ochieng Odhiambo. Over to you, Professor.
Yeah. Yes, I just want to comment on that, right? On what really is philosophy. You see? See, that's what I was saying. You see, there's a sense in which the way some of us define philosophy, we define it in a very exclusivist sense, very exclusive, where we emphasize too much on criticality and independence of thought. That is, we raise it to this, what I was calling the rarefied level. And because of that, right, some people use that to try and exclude other thought systems as being philosophical. So it is not just in China, but in Africa as well, and in the Caribbean as well. That has been an issue, right? Because the conception has been that what philosophy is Occidental, Western philosophy, European philosophy. So when they talk of philosophy, really, that's what they have in mind. And unfortunately, within the academy, even in Africa, right, and the Caribbean, when we do our philosophy, when we teach students philosophy at the university, what we do is we teach them Western philosophy, European philosophy, giving the impression that that is what philosophy is. You cannot have Occidental philosophy, African philosophy, or any other philosophy. But you see, for instance, when I came to the Caribbean, in our philosophy program, we have inserted all those Caribbean, African philosophy, etc., etc. And generally, I usually see philosophy at 4 levels, right? There's what I may call academic sense, where you can emphasize on that criticality at your own expense. There is now what I refer to as philosophic sagacity, which emphasizes on the spiritual, ethical aspect of it, right? And of course, given that yardstick, then Chinese philosophy, actually Oriental philosophy, is very philosophical, because they seem to emphasize more also on the ethical, spiritual, religious, so to speak. And also African philosophy, there's that aspect. I also usually say there's also a third segment, which is social political, right? Nationalist ideological. That also would be philosophical. And then there is what you may call hermeneutics, what I call hermeneutical aspect of philosophy, which revolves around language of a people. And one may want to say that one could also add literal artistic philosophy, right? Because you have these literal writers, right, who actually, when you read their works, they're quite philosophical. So in Barbados, we have wonderful literary critics and writers, and it would be foolhardy, I think, to exclude their thoughts from being philosophical. I just wanted to add that, Chair.
Thank you very much, Neem. I see some fingers going up from Grafton. If I missed anyone else,
Grafton, you can mute. You can unmute yourself. You are muted.
I am muted.
Right, yeah.
Grafton, over to you.
I can hear you.
Yeah, Grafton.
Yeah, thanks very much. My question is addressed to Professor Chen. In his presentation, Professor Chen, you mentioned that philosophy came from two Greek words, meaning love and wisdom. My question is, if you say that philosophy came from two Greek words, why you didn't expressly say it, if the origin comes from Greek words, philosophy comes from Greek words, there is a implication that philosophy did not come out of Greek civilization, which of course I'm objecting to, because I are of the view that philosophy cannot come out of Greek civilization, and it would, because the Greek civilization came after the Egyptian civilization, which came after other civilizations in Africa. So yes, I take the point that maybe in the Caribbean, when we talk about philosophy, we teach the philosophy of the West, but maybe that's the wrong thing and the wrong approach.
Professor Ochieng.
Right, okay, right. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. My bringing that etymological origins was simply for the purpose of my presentation to show that, you know, philosophy and wisdom, right, are connected, right? Even from that Greek definition, they are connected. But unfortunately, through time, they have divorced the two and left sagacity on one side and philosophy on the other. But I've been saying, no, they should be brought together. I agree with you totally. Greek, that philosophy didn't really originate in Greece. Right? Anyone who wants to insist and says it originated in Greece, I think is obviously misguided. When you have a group of people together, when you have a society, then society by definition includes those people having a philosophy, right? So even in a Kenyan community, so to speak, right? We have a philosophy. Of course, we don't use the word philosophy. We use the word rieko, which has nothing to do with Greeks, right? It simply means critical thinking as a way of looking at or enhancing the common good, right? Of course, there's tremendous amount of literature which try to show that actually there was a connection between Greece and ancient Africa, right? In fact, when you read my book, African Philosophy and Introduction, I've touched on that, right? To show that even, let's say, Plato was actually a student in ancient Egypt, right? Aristotle benefited from his contact with ancient Egypt. Thales was in Africa for 33 years. The so-called Pythagoras theorem really was something which was common knowledge in ancient
The Egyptians, yes.
Yes. So really, to say that it is Greek would be problematic. Okay. So I agree with you there.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that answer. We are now a few minutes beyond the 11 o'clock time, 11 o'clock here in the Caribbean in the morning, 11 o'clock at night in China for the wrap up. So I would say maybe one, maybe two more questions if there are more questions. If not, we will then, any more questions at this point? We'd probably take one or two more questions. If not, we then move to the wrap up session.
Yeah, I want to get one more.
Okay.
This again addressed Professor Oshenga. I don't know how you could have not have mentioned the word. I don't know if I missed it. Ubuntu, a fundamental concept in African philosophy, which basically says, I am because we are. The whole concept of brotherhood, humanity, a fundamental concept right across African societies of Ubuntu. of course, since the Europeans came, that concept has a little bit been gone down a little bit, but that was a fundamental concept right across many African civilizations. Concept of Ubuntu, I am because we are, the collectiveness as opposed to the individual. The collective good was more important than the individual.
Right, thank you for that, right. Well, I've written several pieces on the communal spirit in African societies, right? And to add to what you've said, Ubuntu really is I am because we are. And since we are, therefore I am. Right? So in other words, the we in Ubuntu is a fused we, not an additive we, right? Where the I and the we is fused completely. I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. And that's why, for instance, when I'm bringing in sagacity, right? The idea is that sagacity is not really concerned with personal instrumental gain, but the common good, the we, rather than the I, right? Because it is the we which determines and punctuates the I, not the other way around. Of course, in a typical Western European society, it's the other way around, right? So we are told, for instance, in European philosophy, I think, therefore I am. Everything revolves around the I. So that there they see the we, the society, as nothing but a collection of individuals. They don't see community as a fused we, but a collection of I. So prominence is given to the I, as opposed to Ubuntu, where the prominence is given to the we, and not just Ubuntu, but even Oriental philosophy, right? Prominence is given to the we, so to speak. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. I think at this point we will move to the wrap-up stage. And so I would just like to give a personal thank you to the two professors. This is my personal thank you, but I will hand over to my co-director, Grace, to give the formal thank you on behalf of all of us at CA. Over to you, Grace.
All right, thank you. Thank you. This is really a very nice and hard debate. Somewhat like a debate, and I just don't want to stop. Keep going. Okay, all right. So this is really just before the closing, a few words from me. I'm not a philosopher, but I think my limited knowledge of this knowledge, this topic, I think Dean Oshiembo, in his presentation, he pointed out that he doesn't like the philosophy is now very lofty, and he would like to the philosophy to be more okay. He thinks the philosophy is about life. So I think you can if you learn more Chinese philosophy, this is it. So just a few from me, limited knowledge, I just might talk out. I don't know whether this is right or not, so I just speak on behalf of my opinion. Okay, all right. Thank you all. So the distinguished guests, my colleagues, teachers, students, friends, we are gathering today online to celebrate our Confucius Institute Day and China's 73rd birthday with a philosophy symposium, right? Sorry. And I think all will agree that the two scholars, two deans from the two universities took us, taking us on board the ship of sagacity. I think on behalf of all who attending today's symposium, I think we need to show our respect to these two scholars. Thank you. So I believe this is a profound and wonderful philosophical light they input us, and we have wonderful 2 hours of experience of sagacity, wisdom. So I also want to thank all our interpreters or translators, Dr. Liang Chen, Tyron Yewood, Eva Wei, Ian Guo, Alexandra Payne, who took the efforts in doing the interpretation and translation, so that we can, this make our understanding these academic thoughts and exchange possible. Thank you, thank you. And I believe that this symposium is a top philosophical scholars dialogue. I'm looking forward to more dialogues to continue and more frequent and deeper exchanges between the 2 universities in the future. Now I thank you, Principal. You're still here. Okay, thank you for your being present here and make the speech for us. And I'd like to say that after this brain activity, we will exercise our body today, this afternoon. The afternoon, we have fun day activity. The fun day activity will start at 2 o'clock. David shared the screen now. These are we have calligraphy, chopstick competition, mask painting, tea ceremony, Chinese musical instrument, 古筝, and Tai Chi Quan activity. So you can come here in person. The door of the Confucius Institute is open and welcome all who are in Barbados. Okay, that's all. Thank you, and thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
拜拜。
谢谢李老师，
谢
谢谢大家，
谢。
李老师啊。Thank you, Dave.
再见。
再见。
Have a good rest.
Good night.
谢谢于老师。
李老师再见。于老师再见。
再见。
晚安，晚安。
拜拜，大卫。
王老师
再见，各位老师。哎，
希望将来你们能够到这里来进行交流。
Yes, we had a lot of Lees participate in this morning.
Yeah. Lee
Dan, Lee,
largest
Daniel,
group.
another Lee, all family.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
好，
再见。
再见，各位老师。
再见。
好。
See, the center of excellence in teaching and learning was there.
Yeah. Thank you, friends. Okay. 再见 Grafton.
再见。
I know you enjoy the symposium very much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was very good.
I'm happy you're here. Yeah. Thank you. 下午来吗? You come this afternoon?
Sure.
Join us.
Yes. Yeah. 对。
对。今下午见。
再见。
再见。
再见。再见。